Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a discriminatory Karen boss wants me fired for being disabled. However, she does not realize that I am the owner of the company. The title story starts like this. Before I get into Karen or even the same year this story takes place, we first need to take a trip back into the past. So I own a company that sells things like hardware equipment. It's not the biggest place, but I try to keep as much variety as I can for people to come in and get what they might need to fix their homes or start a project. I'll be the first person to say that I know I was lucky that the company did not flop like many others. That luck of mine ran out about 2 years after the company opened. I was riding my motorcycle and got cut off by a car. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital being told that I probably was never gonna walk again. So far the diagnosis has been holding strong and I haven't been able to walk or feel anything in my legs since the crash. Everything else healed fine and there was no reason I couldn't still run my company. Working at the store on a daily basis was just not happening anymore due to my physical limitations and constant appointments. Instead, I came up with a plan that involved an employee that had been with me since day one and was always reliable. I offered him co-ownership of the company and he accepted. I work from home most of the time dealing with the paperwork and business side of things while he runs the day-to-day operations at the store. When it gets busy though, I do come in and help out to keep things going smoothly. Since he is now an owner, we needed to replace him as a manager. So we got an amazing woman and she was with us for 2 years before she went on maternity leave and then chose to not come back. We understood and the look for a new manager was on. My co-owner hired a woman who I'll call Karen for reasons that are obvious if you read the title of the story. I will say that on paper she looked fine and from what I heard there was nothing wrong at her interview. She was a little bossy but it could have been a learning curve being a manager. Then a bad day hit when about 3 employees all called out sick with the same stomach flu. We couldn't get anybody else to come in and cover, so I went in to do whatever I could. 2 men down is better than 3. Again, I am limited in what I can physically do at the store, so it wasn't me that had to get moved to helping with lumber. Instead, I was handling things behind the counter like returns and checking people out. I got radioed that he needed my help in the power tool area because I knew more about shipments and they wanted to know if we were getting something in. I closed my register and started going there when Karen stopped me. Karen, where do you think you're going? Me, power tools area. I'll reopen in a minute, but it's pretty quiet and we have 2 other registers open, so it should be fine, okay? Karen, this is not your call to make. You think that just because you weaseled your way into this job, it means you can do anything you want? Me, are you seriously talking to me like that right now? Karen, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that part of our policy was hiring disabled people and then not getting to call them out like everybody else. If you want to work here, then you need to respect and follow the orders of your boss. Me, and I assume you're talking about yourself? Karen, I cannot believe that they sent us somebody so useless for this job. People are gonna look at you and walk right outside the door. I have no idea how you managed to get this job, but I promise that this is gonna be the last time you work here. Or probably anywhere again. She went off to find the co-owner and I followed. I really did attempt to tell her that I was the owner of the company, but she was faster and didn't want to hear anything else I had to say to her. Instead, I just decided that I was gonna enjoy the show while it lasted. I already decided she was fired the moment she had the nerve to talk to me like that. Nobody should speak to an employee, a customer, or a disabled person the way that she did to me. Her entitlement and full Karen attitude were on full display. She pulled him aside and was whispering, I could hear everything, that she was saying to him about how disabled people shouldn't work here and as a manager she should be the one getting a say on the staff that did and didn't get hired. Also, that there must be some way about whatever government law forced them to hire a disabled person. Finally, if they had to hire one, they should get one that looks normal. I was seething inside, but on the outside answering the customers' questions because I knew things were about to explode. Karen, I demand that he be fired right now. If not, then you're gonna be short somebody else today and have to look for a new manager. Co-owner, you're telling me that you want me to fire him? Points at me. Karen, yes, he abandoned his post and didn't follow a direct order. That is grounds for dismissal. Co-owner, even if it was, I cannot fire him. And before you say anything else, it's not because he's in a wheelchair. He owns more of the company than I do. He started it by himself and his last name is the name of the store. Karen, what? She looked to me now and it was my turn to give her a dirty look. I told her off for being a horrible human being, that if she was treating me like that, I would be worried about how she was treating other employees too. I fired her right there and told her that she shouldn't even bother putting this store on her resume. Because if anybody calls, I will tell them exactly what she thinks of disabled people and how it is okay to treat employees horribly, according to her. She started going on another rant about disabled people not being able to work, but stopped once she looked around. This scene had attracted the attention of many customers and the looks on all their faces were horrified. Kicking her out of the store felt really good because she left with the opposite of her Karen demeanor. Head down in embarrassment and finally realizing that she might have done something wrong. That was my first up-close experience with somebody thinking bad of me due to my disability. At first I thought it would be good for me to start doing new hiring to make sure that nobody like that was hired again. The more I pondered, I changed my mind because I had a much better idea. I was not gonna hire anybody, but I was gonna show up almost undercover as an employee every single time to see how they treated and reacted to me. It was a good indication of how they treat other employees as well as customers they might come across. All currently hired staff knows about this, and when I show up to test a new employee, none of them blow my cover. We have yet to have another Karen even get through the hiring process, but my new system gives me some hope for people. I've had new employees even defend me from customers that come in and think that I cannot help them. It has been a mess, but I really hope that from here on out things will start to get back to some kind of normal. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you have ever dealt with irate customers yourself, then please let us know about your stories in the comments. And while you're at it, I would very much appreciate it if you could also like the video, because that would help me tremendously. Anyway, the next one is another revenge story. 3 years ago, the balcony railings in my apartment building had to be replaced. This involved locking us out of the balconies, obviously. Not a big deal, hey, it's a couple weeks, right? But nope, they got the absolutely cheapest crew they could and could not be bothered to source the railing beforehand, so we were locked in our apartments for over a year. Including during a heat wave, and they still charged us for using window air conditioners. What triggered my revenge is the balconies were mostly done except my column. Why? Because the super lives on the ground floor below me and decided now is the perfect time to build himself a new backyard and hold up construction, which left me locked in for another 2 weeks as they built fences and laid out lovely new green sod. Ever since I've been nicking a bag of sidewalk salt from the building's storage bins, in other words, his salt, each winter and throwing few handfuls of it into his yard every night when spring comes around. I enjoy hearing him wondering out loud why nothing grows in his yard and his wife yell at him for using too much fertilizer. It's probably got the pH levels of the Dead Sea by now. And the next one is titled, "You Get Me Kicked Out? I'll Do the Same to You." Posted by user BigConstruction443 on r/Ripe Stories, our own subreddit. And by the way, if you have any interesting stories to tell, I would suggest you to head on over to r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, where you can post your own stories and there's a good chance that I will read them in a video. Anyway, this one starts like this. This happened over 30 years ago when I was in the army. I was stationed in the army during Desert Shield. Well, right after Desert Storm started, they were looking for radio repairmen, which is what I did, to go to Saudi Arabia, which I volunteered for. My commander asked why I wanted to go. I informed him that I wanted to keep the family tradition going, informed him that dating to the Civil War, every generation in my family served in a war or police action. He approved my transfer, skip ahead 2 months, and my commander was transferred due to a promotion to major. My new commander, upon receiving my orders, ripped them up and informed me that I was no longer going to Saudi Arabia. When I asked why, my commander told me that I did not deserve to go. Now, this is where I run into the first officer or upper non-commissioned officer and CO that I didn't get along with. Well, I copped an attitude and I told him to F off. Well, 2 days later, I was brought into the commander's office for an Article 15 in which I was reduced in rank. E4 promotable E4P to E3. During this time I requested for a transfer. Now in the army, if you request a transfer after a unit level demotion, they must give it to you. However, he denied it. When I was dismissed from his office, I just walked out without showing him any respect as required. 3 days later, I was back into his office for another Article 15, this time for disrespecting an officer. He asked me why I disrespected him a few days prior, and I informed him that I cannot respect someone who does not respect me or army regulations. Now, at this time I had already reported him to the Judge Advocate General, and well, afterwards I was busted again from E3 to E2. And then was discharged from the service due to being an E2 with nearly 9 years in, where the maximum for E2 is 6 years. After my discharge 2 months later, I went to visit a girl on the post I was semi-seeing. She was being sent to another duty station. I ran into my previous commander and he was now a second lieutenant. Apparently, while I was away, he had been demoted twice and was on his way out of the army for the same reason I was released. Now, in the army and probably the other branches, it's nearly impossible for an officer to get busted without a court-martial. Now, I don't know for sure if this was the case or not. I found out through my friends that he was busted for not only my complaint, but for several other complaints. Wasn't informed on that complaint. I may have been the first to report him, or maybe the last. I also found out that the reason he wouldn't let me go to Saudi Arabia was for the reason that as soon as I got there, I would have gotten a field promotion and he didn't want me to have my sergeant's stripes. He was one of those people that thought if you didn't belong in his occupation, you didn't belong in the army. Later that day, I ran into my former commander again, and at this point I remarked, "Bet you wish you let me go to Saudi Arabia, you dumb idiot." I know that some of you would say that I'm to blame for my actions, and yes I am, but it still doesn't excuse my commander for his thinking. Again, I was not looking at my field promotion because honestly, I had no idea that would happen. I just wanted to go, again, to keep the family tradition going. However, I'm the one to serve the longest in the service out of all my relatives. The next one is titled, "Return the car empty? Okay, done." Posted by user MA77MC on r/ripe stories. Talking to my grandmother earlier today reminded me of this story from a number of years ago. So I live in Sydney and used to fly up to the Gold Coast 3 or 4 times a year to check on my grandma. The whole family was in Sydney, so someone would usually pop up once each month to help her out. Anyway, I would always rent a car from Hertz when I arrived. At the time, they offered a prepaid fuel option where you would pay an amount and not need to refuel before return. It was usually less than you would pay at the local service station, so I usually took this option. As I picked up the keys to this shiny new manual Toyota Corolla, the woman said to me, "So you have the prepaid fuel, just bring it back empty." After a few days of relaxing by the beach, I ran a few errands for my grandma in the morning before my 15 o'clock flight, when suddenly the fuel light comes on and the words of the Hertz staff ring in my ear. "Bring it back empty." Not wanting to push it, I pull it into 7-Eleven and put 2 liters in and went on my way. The light did not extinguish, but with the distance I needed to cover, I figured I'd be safe. About 13 o'clock, my grandma is pushing me out the door, telling me to catch my flight, so I make the 6-kilometer trip to the airport, the whole time anxiously wondering if I'll make it with the fuel remaining. As I was coming up on the airport, I felt the engine splutter, but it was still going. Heading in, it started spluttering more. So much so that I genuinely thought I would run out mere meters from my destination. As I pulled through the boom gate for rental returns, I put my foot down and got a final burst of acceleration. The car determined to be the little engine that could, my finish line in sight, and the car is gonna make it. Until it didn't, the car stalled. With the momentum I had, I pulled into a spot marked AVIS. It only made it about halfway in. I tried in vain to restart it, but it wasn't to be. I got out and pushed the little engine that could into bay 109. I was 11 bays short of the first marked Hertz and was a broken man. My goal so near yet so far, torment ran through my mind. Did those 11 bays mean I was short of my goal to bring it back empty? I mean, it was in the rental car park after all, and it wasn't uncommon for people to just park in a spot and ignore who owns the spot. Anyway, I walk into the terminal, carry on roller bay in one hand, car keys in the other, and walk up to rental returns. "Can I help you?" the same young woman asks as I walk up to her. "Returning a car," I said. She takes the paperwork and asks where I had parked it. "Bay 109, it says AVIS," I respond. Her not looking up, she shrugs and talks into the radio on the counter. "Return 109. Finally she says, "Did you fill it up?" I say no, and she asks roughly how much is left. I say none. "Oh, so the petrol light is on. No worries," she says. "No," I say. "I mean, it ran out of fuel as I drove in. I had to push it into the parking spot." The helpful woman gives me a blank stare for full 10 seconds. "Wait, you let it run out? You said return it empty, so I accepted your challenge. Seems I win," I said with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. The staff member turns to a colleague, points at me and says, "Prepaid fuel," and he says it ran out in the car park. The guy looks at me with a smirk and says, "Really? Well, it wouldn't start back up, I reply as someone comes in from outside to get the keys. It's out of fuel, the woman says. That's okay, I run it up to Shell after I washed it, he replies. Both terminal staff look at him as the woman, looking at me, says, no, the customer says he had to push it into the spot. Cue the largest eyes I've ever seen. I have to see this. He walks out with me and the guy from behind the counter following behind opens the car and tries to start it. It's cranking but won't turn over as all three of us burst out laughing. I've never had one fully out before, he says when I tell him. Well, the woman in there told me to bring it back empty, as I walk inside, laughing to check my bags. And damn, Ripe stars, this guy takes malicious compliance really serious. Absolutely brilliant. And the next one is titled, No Lady, I Don't Work for the Army. So I am a World War II reenactor who reenacts US Army. I usually tend to practice battle scenes in my yard, so that way I'm prepared for a reenactment. This happened about a week ago and I thought that it was just too stupid, so I had to tell someone. So why not all of Reddit? I was just practicing as usual in full gear when the dreaded beast lurks forth from the street. Now, I try to be respectful to people, but this lady was horrible. I was smack middle in the center of my yard and this lady just walks up and starts babbling about something. I was not close enough to hear her, so I ignored her. I tend to get a lot of gawkers. Most people don't see a crazy guy running around in a WW2 uniform, so I thought she was just there to look and then move on. But then all of a sudden I hear her yelling for help, so I look over to see if something is wrong and I start moving in that direction. I did not see anything wrong, so I paused confused. Then she started yelling that I was stealing from her. I was confounded and trying to grasp why she was yelling that, so I walked over to try to ask her to stop and to talk it out. The following conversation goes like this. Me, why are you yelling that? Lady, because you have stolen from me. Me, I'm not sure how I did that. I don't even know you. Lady, don't patronize me. I don't have to answer to an idiot like you. Now give it back. Me, listen lady, like I said, I don't know you. Could you please calm down so we can talk? I am happy to answer any questions you have. Lady, I'm not talking to someone who is assaulting me. You stole that from me. At this point I got confused as I don't remember stealing anything from her. Me, alright listen, how about we both calm down and talk about this like adults? Lady, why should I? You stole from me. Now give me back that army stuff. Me, ma'am, this is all my equipment. If someone stole your stuff, I would be happy to help you look for it. Lady, liar, you stole it all from me. If you don't give it back, I will call the cops. Thinking this was a bluff, I went inside. Because what kind of crazy lady would actually call the cops on something as trivial as trying to get my stuff? A couple of minutes later, I see two officers outside my house. I went outside and this lady is screaming at them. Lady, the lunatic is in there, go bust down his door already. Officer number 1, ma'am, I believe he's already here. Me, what's the problem, officers? Officer number 1, name and age please. I proceed to give them. Officer 2, sir, did you steal this woman's army stuff? Me, no ma'am, all the equipment is mine. I have the receipts of the purchase. Lady, liar, that's my stuff, I want it. Officer number 1, sir, could we come inside to ask you a few questions? Me, sure thing. Lady, make sure he gives all of my stuff back, I want it now. The officers questioned me, I showed them the receipts and told them of how this lady just came up and accused me. The officers just looked at each other as if they had done this before. The officers then went back outside and talked with the lady. I watched from the inside because I did not want any more yelling, and watched as the officers drove away. This lady then proceeds to have a breakdown in front of my house and walks away. I have not seen her since. Maybe she is still out there lurking in the shadows to strike another unsuspecting victim. And yeah, ripe stars, I would almost assume that the lady in this story had some mental health issues, so yeah, sometimes in these stories, I mean, as outrageous as they are, but it is kind of a little bit hard to laugh at them, because I sort of feel sorry for the people involved, and not just OP. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.